Our next talk is a fireside chat with Hough, the MD of Hidden Africa. He was formerly the CEO of STA Travel and then Penn Travel, where he was at the helm for 8 years and led the team to realize an 891% profit growth during his tenure. He was most recently the head of Investec's travel offering, where he spearheaded the launch of their in-house travel offer, Travel by Investec. He's currently launching a new venture, Hidden Africa, which is a startup safari tour operator. Needless to say, he's a seasoned veteran in the travel industry. He's also someone who is passionate about both customer experience and employee experience, and has made both customer centricity and team culture core tenets of his strategy and leadership approach. When I was speaking with the organizing team of this event about our local track, I wanted to incorporate a perspective from a business leader who has experience in an industry that is unique to South Africa. Safari is certainly something that is specific to Africa, and tourism is such an important part of South Africa's economy. I thought that Sean would be the perfect speaker to bring it all together for us on this Customer Experience Day. And with that, I'm going to press play and share our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Sean, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's an absolute pleasure to be having this fireside chat with somebody who is such an expert in the travel industry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. You know, we're talking about travel, and Julia, we were saying earlier, it's the one industry that everybody is an expert on. So it's always difficult. It's difficult to talk about something that's so close to people's hearts, that they love so much, that they're missing so much, and they understand so well. But yeah. I'll do my best.
No, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's such a tangible industry, something that everybody can relate to. So before we jump into, some of your insights and kind of what you've seen happen in the industry during the course of your career, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your career. You've had such a varied and exciting career path in the travel sector. Can you just share a little bit about what drew you to this industry and your roles?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been in the industry for 30 years, and I know you wouldn't say so.
Of course not. What, did you start working when you were 13?
Exactly. So I feel like one of the reasons I sort of did well in the industry was because of my name. So my very first job was working for Thompson's Holidays in sales, looking after media and travel trade. And my then boss, Anton Thompson, employed me because my name was Sean. So there were 2 other sales guys, also Sean and Sean, and he thought the hat trick would be funny. So I got the job within the first 5 minutes of the interview, based on the fact that I had a name, Sean, that fitted in with his vision for his sales team.
That's great.
Yeah, it was a fantastic place to start my career in travel, because we socialized with travel trade and with media, and we traveled the world with all of them. So it certainly was the right place to go and get that passion for travel, or to find that passion for travel. The second time it happened was when I was the CEO of Penn Travel. I very quickly became known as Sean Penn. I've been in retail travel and in wholesale travel. I've been in inbound travel and I've been in outbound travel. The key difference has been the sort of the golden thread, or the theme of it, is that I've always only been in leisure travel.
Okay.
So leisure is my passion. Leisure is my experience.
Okay. And leisure travel is, also probably of the different travel industries, the one that is, really set to recover now. I think business travel might be in a little bit of trouble here, but we can talk about that in just a minute. So, customer experience as we know it as a professional field of work it's still new in a lot of industries, but it's always been a big feature and a key differentiator in the travel industry. How have you seen customer experience and I guess customer expectations evolve over the course of your career?
So, I mean, it's a great assumption that you have, but it hasn't always been part of the industry. 30 years ago, when we worked in travel, there was no sort of computer technology. If you wanted to book a ticket, you used the phone to phone the airline. And similarly, the type of person who worked in travel was, without sort of being rude or sexist, was often the wife who was working to get all the travel perks. So, it wouldn't be a career in which you would earn a lot of money, And I mean, in those days, it was a very simple industry. There were two airlines that flew between South Africa and London, and that was British Airways and SAA. They had three classes, and the fares were exactly the same in economy, business, and first class, and exactly the same on SAA as they were on British Airways. Operated in an environment of regulation. So, it typically in those days, the person was really just an order taker. It was a lot of it, you couldn't travel to many places because South Africa was closed to a lot of the world.
That's true, yeah.
And the industry was driven primarily by corporate travel. And so you had this sort of stereotype of this sort of older woman who is working in travel and is really very much an order taker. So, obviously, the two things that impacted greatly on the travel industry were technology. So the introduction of booking systems and, ways to access air tickets electronically, not having to phone. And then obviously the internet. So when the internet came along, it was said to kind of spell the death knell for travel agents. It was kind of felt that that would be it for travel agents. You wouldn't actually need them anymore. And it was true that many of them actually did go out of business, but the ones that evolved, the ones that kind of became travel experts, actually then went on to sort of grow stronger and kind of just become more and more successful. So, the internet had actually a very positive impact on the industry versus a negative impact on the industry. And I guess it really just forced travel agents to compete and to be better. I think within the South African context, really Flight Centre as a group, when they came into the country, had an enormous impact on leisure travel. So Flight Centre kind of turned everything on their head. They were that first business that really understood brand. And so all of the shops looked the same. Everybody had to wear a uniform that looked the same. They employed very young professional graduate consultants, trained them up and gave them extensive training, and incentivized them. So, suddenly this became an industry and a career that was interesting to graduates or to more ambitious people, because, you had people who could earn in excess of 50,000 Rand a month. And I guess the biggest impact of the Flight Centre was their strategy to have a shop on like every street corner. And, it really they really, really made travel accessible, and accessible to kind of a new person who was traveling. And once again, leisure travel agents kind of, it was a case of if you don't join them, you're going to be out of business. And so they eventually kind of changed the whole model and the whole way that leisure travel was sold by retailers in South Africa. So I guess those are two of the biggest sort of events within the leisure industry, the advent of the internet, and then to coming into the country. So this meant that old dinosaur kind of travel agent, going back to the stereotype, the one who had one cigarette out of the mouth and the other cigarette in the ashtray.
Yeah, exactly. Printing out paper tickets and
correct. Had that sort of person had gone extinct, kind of thing, and it was replaced by this new energetic kind of travel expert, this person who could really help a consumer disseminate all of the information that was on the internet.
And I suppose in the South African context, I never really thought about this before, but because it was such a highly regulated industry, and during the time of apartheid, there, South Africans were so limited in where they could travel that actually, as things changed and evolved, a lot of consumers were probably totally unfamiliar with what it would take to book travel, understand different destinations, that this maybe wasn't something that was accessible at all. So they were interested, but totally unfamiliar with how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's South Africa isn't a very sophisticated travel market, and it isn't a very large leisure travel market. We often refer to South Africa as a first-time travel market.
Okay.
And so, for the whole of the 90s and even some of the 2000s, people were still going to destinations considered the first-time destinations.
Yeah.
And people were going to a lot of destinations that they loved, and safe destinations, islands in the Indian Ocean, that kind of thing. But still today, the destinations that are the most popular with the main mass leisure market are Indian Ocean, probably number one, Far East, probably number two. That's driven by price with Thailand. And then Europe, which sort of comprises culture or skiing or cruising or whatever the case is. They're starting to move off to North America, but the second time, the sort of the destinations that are normally reserved for more well-traveled people, very much considered niche destinations in South Africa.
Okay. So, it's also really interesting that you've mentioned that the advent of the internet really forced this industry to be better. And I think that hit the travel industry before it hit other industries. So sort of around about 2000, anywhere, I guess you could probably say between 2008 and sort of 2012, as smartphones became so widespread and a lot of people had, access to the internet and online information, social media started to really take off. It really provided a platform for consumers to gain information about goods and services, and also to share information and reviews. And this, created this really, dramatic shift in power from brands to consumers. And, it really walloped a lot of organizations out there. They really kind of, I think, weren't prepared for this. It was such a huge shift. But it sounds like this happened in the travel industry, probably 10, 15 years before it happened in other industries. I mean, can you think of any organizations out there that have really risen to the challenge and met the needs of connected, clued in, savvy consumer who's aware of all the choice that they have?
So, yeah, I mean, the irony is that it wasn't a dramatic shift. And for whatever reason, it was a very gradual process within the travel industry.
Yeah.
I suspect that it might have been two things. One was technology and internet speed, which was always very, very weak in South Africa. Going back to dial-up, where you had that ridiculous telephone thing.
Yeah, it's like crackling in the background. You're like, what's happening?
But it's happened. We had a lot of time to prepare because the other point was fraud. So cybersecurity. So the average South African was a little bit nervous about putting their credit card into any kind of .com or internet site around the world for fear of having all of that money stolen. So I suspect those are the two reasons, like poor connectivity and fraud. But that meant that as the travel industry, we could leverage the internet for our gain. So it made us better. It assisted us in delivering a better customer experience, because we had access to information at our fingertips, including those reviews that you talk about. So it's always an expectation that a travel agent has personally inspected every hotel in every city, in every state of every country in the world.
You mean you haven't done that?
Of course. But there's the odd one that you miss. And that's the review sites, gave you that sort of confidence to recommend that property. So it was a gradual process, and thankfully, because it allowed us to leverage the technology for our own gain and to give a better service, but learn the technology at the same time.
Interesting.
So who's done it well in a South African, from a South African point of view? So the majority of your travel is corporate. This is 2019, pre-COVID. 70% of the industry was made up of corporate sales, and the balance was leisure. But of that number, 80% of all tickets were still booked through a traditional high street type travel agent, and not through any kind of online portal. So, who's done it well? Obviously, from a flight booking point of view, Travelstart have done it really well. But they have a very small percentage of the market. It's less than 10%. From an inbound point of view, you also have some strong players. Two businesses called Go to Africa and Rhino Africa, who've also done it very well. These are not automated booking sites like travel sites. They're more brochure sites. Their whole business model is dependent on that website for generating leads and achieving their sales targets.
Let's chat in a minute about the inbound travel and the difference between that. And when you're talking about inbound travel, you're talking about people coming in from overseas, which is a totally different kind of market. I want to chat about that in a second. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about sort of what's happened over the last 18 months. It's been such a crazy time. I mean, you were talking about dinosaurs. And I think if the dinosaurs didn't die when the internet came around, they were probably totally wiped out from the asteroid that is COVID, or that was COVID, is COVID. I guess, we're going to be we're still dealing with it, and we're probably going to be dealing with it for a while. Can you share a little bit about the future of this industry as we kind of finally settle into a new normal, as travel maybe begins to resume as vaccine rollouts gain steam? What are you seeing as the future of this industry?
So yeah, it's the good news is that I think that the travel agent is going to be very popular again.
Yeah.
So travel agents have worked really hard to help people with all of the rules and the regulations. And travel agents have helped them with their constantly changing travel plans, help them get money back,
Yeah.
So yeah, travel agents are resilient. There have been sad stories like STA Travel, a big global business that has unfortunately closed its doors. But yeah, travel will come back. It already has. So a lot of the leisure travel agents kind of quickly shifted to focus on domestic business.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing as much as sort of between 35 and 50% of turnover on domestic,
Okay.
which is exciting, and it's very exciting for the local domestic tourism economy as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Have these two industries, the local domestic tourism and this inbound tourism, so people coming in from overseas, are those two markets very different in terms of like the types of experiences and the types of expectations?
Completely different. It's one of the reasons why some did better than others, because they either always had a South African strategy, or they quickly developed a South African strategy. So, I know you love examples. Probably the best example is the Oyster Box in Umhlanga.
Okay.
The Oyster Box has always had a South African strategy. It can't rely completely on inbound business, I guess, because it's in KZN, which is not as popular as Cape Town is with foreign tourists.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all had, you've heard of the SADC rate by now, so they all lowered their rates and offered South African residents a special rate. But the Oyster Box, I believe, has had record years for food and beverage turnover.
Wow.
So, their strategy was, let's lower the rate, but, we'll make it up on food and beverage. But it is key to know that the two markets are different. So your inbound market doesn't really hang out at the hotel, doesn't really want to be wined and dined at the hotel, doesn't want to listen to music. They want to have a lovely meal and enjoy the nice view, but they generally go off to do all sorts of activities during the day.
Yeah.
Whereas the local person, he wants to just park off at the hotel, have a couple of beers, enjoy some wine, listen to some music, have a great meal, swim in the pool, walk on the beach. So the hotel becomes a destination. I mean, it was key for people to understand that, and even in the restaurant industry, I've noticed that so many restaurants are still closed on a Sunday, which is okay from an inbound point of view, but from a local point of view, that's when most South African families will want to go and have lunch together.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Huh. It's interesting.
Yeah, so there is quite a big difference. And the fact that all of these different hospitality providers lowered their rates to stimulate travel doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't done well, because there have been other opportunities like food and beverage.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting kind of, I guess, survival technique. I mean, you've got to do what you've got to do. It's been a rough, a really rough time. I did read something just today, actually, about how Cape Town was voted the top destination are the best city in Africa and the Middle East by Travel and Leisure magazine. So that's pretty exciting. So hopefully that means that there's a little bit of, focus on, inbound travelers to Cape Town, and hoping that the industry recovers. Do you see any pockets? Sorry,
to end off on the domestic thing. So right around the world, domestic tourism is looking good. Within the case of South Africa, our traveling population is so much smaller. So we can't rely on South Africans. So where they're going, they're doing wonderful things like going into the bush, they're going to Kruger, they're going to the garden route, places that are battled are the cities, so Cape Town's battled, Johannesburg's battled, but Australia, UK, Europe, US have very strong domestic markets. And all those markets are probably in full recovery at the moment. In the US now, I think there's a little bit of a slowdown caused by the Delta variant. But domestic markets have been the mainstay of the tourism industry. A little bit more challenging. I mean, if you're in Thailand, your domestic market is only 5% of your total market. So, initially, they didn't have a strong domestic market to turn to.
That's interesting. So, we can't really look at all of these global examples equally. We can't say, well, the recovery here is going to be the same as in the US because the domestic travel market is just not large enough to sustain, the infrastructure, the businesses, that we're thriving off of the inbound tourism. So, we'd have to look to examples, I guess, like Thailand and other places of, how they bring in, how they're bringing in outside tourists. I was reading something, I don't know if Singapore is the same. I was also reading something recently about how Singapore is leveraging, they're really leaning into like a digital first strategy for, as like a destination experience. So everything from, like a vaccine passport to information about destinations to the ability to do contactless check-ins and things. And they're really trying to, lean on that as a way to say, okay, we're a safer destination. And I don't know if that for them is, I guess Singapore is so small, all of their tourism must be inbound tourism. Do you think that there's going to be much of a, need for, organizations in this sector to lean more on technology?
I think so, particularly the vaccine passport. It's difficult to know how that one will turn out. It can also potentially be a political issue.
Yeah, that's true. Put some people off, I guess.
I was reading just this morning that Boris Johnson is now cancelling the UK vaccine passport, but his neighbour France have had so much success with their vaccine passport. It's really tricky, but it's looking more and more likely that you won't be able to get into a restaurant without some kind of proof of a vaccine. And loads of venues are implementing that, even if there isn't a sort of national vaccine passport. So I think, and the best way to do it is digitally, I guess, but it's such a political issue. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch.
It'll be definitely an interesting one to watch. So much kind of hanging in the balance. So I know that your next big project is within the safari space, which sounds like largely driven by this inbound, international travelers coming to South Africa. It's also a kind of travel which is so unique to Africa. I wanted to dive into that a little bit. How has this industry been hit during COVID? And, has the impact been different than other aspects of the travel industry? Have needs and expectations changed? What do you see as kind of like the path to recovery for this particular part of the travel industry that is so special that, can only happen here in Africa?
Well, it hasn't been great to watch because, this industry is very involved with local communities.
Mm,
And so often the people who've been suffering are those local communities. And they're
yeah,
the people who can least afford to
yeah, that's
suffer
true.
or sacrifice,
Yeah,
Um, it has been tougher for countries like Botswana, again, that doesn't have as established a domestic sort of travel market as South Africa does.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, there's been a lot of support, and I'm happy to say that there are lots and lots of green shoots. I
yeah.
think I think you are right. I think that people are going to want sort of travel that is quieter.
Mm.
Uh, they're
We've
going to
all become
want.
introverts a little bit.
Well, I mean, they're not going to go to Tomorrowland or to Venice or
Yeah,
you know, but they're also going to be looking for sort of more ethical travel, the kind of travel that supports communities like
yeah,
this. Um, luxury travel, because this sector, Botswana operates, or the safari industry tends to operate on a sort of high yield, low impact model. So,
yeah,
where many people travel, very few people travel to a concession of 600,000 hectares type
yeah,
of thing, but they pay a lot more for that privilege.
yeah,
And, you know, the safari industry is generally considered to be part of the luxury travel
yeah,
segment. And it's another segment that I think will come back quicker and sooner.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, the future looks good for the safari industry.
yeah. Do you think, do you see any organizations, could be, tour operators, lodges, other providers in this space responding particularly creatively to the challenges of, managing travel in the time of COVID? Do you think that organizations are going to have to start thinking about things differently? Or do you think it's just kind of a watch and wait until consumer confidence rebounds?
Um, I think flexibility is a big thing. I
Mm,
think people will spend a lot more on travel insurance and on flexibility.
yeah.
Um, I really loved what our newest airline in South Africa, Lift Airlines, did,
Mm,
because they kind of made their offering completely flexible.
yeah.
And to my mind, I think that was one of the first low-cost airlines that have ever done that.
Yeah.
So if you can't make your flight, it doesn't matter. It becomes like a coupon, and you've got a period of time to use it again.
Yeah.
If you get to the airport too early, you can change your flight without any penalty.
Mm,
So, the other one that did a very good job with flexibility is
mm.
a UK-based company called Black Tomato.
Okay.
They've made all of their leisure packages flexible, and they
Okay.
had a really fun payoff line, something like "Go and flex yourself." I
It's
can't
cute. That's
remember
really
what it
cute.
was. But I think that yeah, there haven't been as many examples of how people have really adapted.
Yeah.
Um, I think an airline that is worth mentioning is Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they continued to fly regardless. So they implemented health protocols, and they decided that they were going to be the world's airline during COVID.
Yeah.
And the key with them is that they were so consistent. So,
Yeah.
so what was happening during the peak pandemic is people were booking flights, and then they were being cancelled like 3 weeks later. So airlines were
Yeah.
keeping that inventory in the system with
Yeah.
no intention of having that flight fly with passengers.
Yeah.
But the poor consumer didn't know that. So the traveler
Yeah.
was buying a ticket, Whereas Qatar was that airline that started to have that reliability, and people realized that and began to trust them, and they did very well out of it. They've done very well generally in the pandemic.
Well, that's, I think that's quite interesting because it's a shift in mindset. I think, within the business, meeting a shift in mindset that's happening among consumers around risk. So instead of pushing all the risk onto consumers, recognizing that the environment that consumers are in right now is one which is filled with risk and uncertainty. And so let's take that out of the equation. Let's take that worry away. We'll take on that risk, as a provider, and put the consumer at ease. It's a really smart strategy from a psychological perspective, quite creative.
I mean, the Maldives also need some credit as a destination. They obviously, looked at the Maldives, and, because of what it is, it's absolutely ideal as a COVID destination. You on your own private island, and you don't even have to walk down a corridor to get to your room. It's individual bungalows under beautiful palm trees. And so they positioned themselves as a destination that would be open from early, but they never, ever shut the destination. So while other destinations opened, again, there was that lack of consistency. And so stopped wanting to book that destination. Whereas Maldives, I think, has really won over a whole new market. They also dropped their prices. They had to compete. And it'll be interesting to see if people start flocking back to the traditional islands like Mauritius and that type of thing.
Well, here's to hoping that it does recover. So many people's lives and livelihoods depend on this industry. It keeps us connected. It helps us rest and rejuvenate. I think that it brings families together. The travel sector is so important. And here's hoping to, 2022 being better days and strong recovery, and that you get to play a part in, how this helps the recovery in South Africa too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I hope so. 2 years is long enough now.
It's been enough. It's been long enough. Thank you so much, Sean, for taking the time to join me for this fireside chat. And it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.